Good evening. My name is Rosa Murray and I'm a member of the core group of Scottish Laity Network. And tonight it's my privilege to welcome you to the third evening of our Season of Creation 2023 series, Let Justice and Peace Flow Like a Mighty River. Throughout our programme, we are seeking to explore ways in which we can embrace and respond to Pope Francis's message for the Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation. Recalling the evocative image of the prophet Amos, let justice flow on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream, Pope Francis reminds us of what God desires of us.
God wants justice to reign. It is as essential to our life as God's children made in his likeness, as water is essential for our physical survival. This justice must flow forth wherever it is needed, neither remaining hidden deep beneath the ground, nor vanishing like water that evaporates before it can bring sustenance. God wants everyone to strive to be just in every situation, to live according to his laws, and thus to enable life to flourish. When we seek first the kingdom of God, maintaining a right relationship with God, humanity and nature, then justice and peace can flow like a never-failing stream of pure water, nourishing humanity and all creatures. In this season of creation, as followers of Christ on our shared synodal journey, let us live, work and pray that our common home will teem with life once again. May the Holy Spirit once more hover over the waters and guide our efforts to renew the face of the earth.
As is our tradition, let us now spend time in prayer, opening ourselves to the Holy Spirit, conscious of the cry of the poor and the cry of the earth, and our interrelatedness with all cosmic life.
God, beyond our dreams, you have stirred in us a memory. You have placed your powerful spirit in the hearts of humankind. All around us we have known you, all creation lives to hold you. In our living and our dying, we are bringing you to birth. God, beyond all names, you have
And so tonight we continue our programme by reflecting on how might Christians respond to the climate emergency with our companion Val King. To introduce and welcome Val, I'm delighted to hand over to Stephen Curran, the manager of Eco Congregation Scotland. We're so grateful that Eco Congregation Scotland are co-badging our programme, and Stephen will say a few words about the organisation and then welcome and introduce our companion Val for this evening. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you to the Scottish Laity Network. We are delighted to be joining you on your journey through the season of creation this year. I'm Stephen Curran, the manager of Eco Congregation Scotland. I'm also a parishioner at St Helens Catholic Church in Langside in the south of Glasgow. And we're really excited about supporting tonight's event. Eco Congregation Scotland supports churches all over Scotland in environmental activities. Currently 48 Catholic parishes of the nearly 650 churches of all sorts across Scotland who are part of our movement, committed to care and act for God's creation. Our work revolves around three aspects of what spiritual living, or what the Laudato Si movement would call ecological conversion, and the prayer that we're all taking part in this evening as part of the season of creation. Practical living, taking the steps such as the net zero commitment of churches and the changes in all our lives to tackle the climate emergency. And we're currently consulting on the just transition to make sure that those who can least afford to bear the brunt of climate change don't have to pay that price here in Scotland. And many of you have already been taking part in our consultation events for the Scottish Government this month. And the third aspect is global living. It's campaigning and advocacy, and really what we're talking about tonight, where we want to make sure that climate justice is at the heart of our activities committed to serving the God of all creation. One of my favourite stories in the past year has been in the Church Times, the Church of England and wider Anglican Communion newspaper. And it's a story by Val King about why she chained herself to a bank. So hopefully Val will tell us a bit more about that this evening. Val comes from a business background and was joint owner and managing director of a manufacturing company based in the Cotswolds. In 2019, the business was sold to 70 employees via an employee ownership trust. And Val and her husband Pete moved to Stirling, where they now own a 69-acre farm they're rewilding. She now spends her time in climate activism, advising businesses on employee ownership and growing veggies in a very large polytunnel. We're delighted to support, as a partner, the work of Christian Climate Action Scotland, and our own eco-chaplain David Coleman joined Val a special pilgrimage in Glasgow, basically retracing the steps of COP26 and all those promises that still need to be carried out to deliver a much fairer, greener future for the world. Val's also well known to our movement through Stirling Methodist Church and our Stirling network of eco congregations, who had a really lively discussion this week on just transition. and raising some concerns about the latest announcements by the Prime Minister on net zero. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Val tonight. And we're talking about how important it is as people of faith we respond to the climate emergency. Over to you, Val. Thank you very much.
Everyone, my name's Val King, and thanks very much to Rab for inviting me this evening to share with you a Christian response to the climate crisis. I'm coordinator for Christian Climate Action in Scotland, and in fact I've just moved from England about a year or so ago, and my husband Pete and I have a farm near Stirling, and so we are rewilding this 70-acre farm, which is a bit daunting since we don't know very much about it. But we do have a lot of networks now to help us to do that. And in fact, I was at a meeting recently where there are a lot of other partners in this Northwoods rewilding network. And so it's heartening to know that there are a lot of people who are understanding the crisis that we're in and want to do something about it, something practical, and they happen to have land and they're rewilding their various acres in a way that will actually give back to nature. So that's always encouraging. It's in times like this, we need to hold on to encouraging stories, and as well as facing what the crisis is about. So I'm going to cover 3 areas: why we're called as Christians, facts on climate change, and our response as Christians. So a good place to start, I think, is to start thinking about a Christian response to the climate crisis. And it's to ask why God's creation matters to us. Of course, this amazing planet is our life support system. Everything we need, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, and the ground we build our homes on. It's given to us. But it's more than that. Creation is a gift from God. And Jesus commands us to love our neighbours. And we need to think, who are our neighbours? They're, in fact, everyone in the world. And so we are commanded to value and safeguard the well-being of those neighbours. And we all know now, in particular, that the systems and structures that we humans have put in place aren't doing a very good job of that. So let's explore what's happening to this gift from God, this holy creation, and to our neighbours on our watch. Heat waves, droughts, storms, rising sea levels, flooding, wildfires, these are all consequences of the extra energy that we're pushing into the system by man-made global heating. And this crisis is not something in the future. It's happening now. We're at 1.2 degrees of average temperature increase already, and around a third of the global population are already experiencing warming of more than 1.5 degrees C, and it's already bringing untold suffering. And the reality is that we're heading for 3 degrees or more of warming, which will be catastrophic. And as Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, reminds us, this is senseless and suicidal. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this graph. Climate change is complex, but the main cause is quite simple. We're in a climate crisis caused by burning of fossil fuels, primarily, which produce carbon dioxide. And so the science is irrefutable in this. The red line shows concentration of carbon dioxide over the past 2,000 years. As you can see, it's going up very clearly. And the blue squiggly line shows the average annual temperature from 1880 to 2019. So average temperature is going up as CO2 goes up in concentration. And before the Industrial Revolution, CO2 pretty much stayed somewhere around 280 parts per million. After the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide emissions began to skyrocket. In 2022, CO2 levels were around 417 ppm, parts per million. So that's gone from 280 to 417. And that's the highest level that anyone has seen in the last 3 million years. And the effects of this is what you can see here. So this is if the planet warmed by up to 4 degrees in average temperature. And the yellow there means uninhabitable. And it really doesn't bear thinking about. And what's more worrying is that this is a progressive state. This is the state that it would get to at 4 degrees, but at 1.5 degrees, it's already a serious issue where there are many areas around the equator that are uninhabitable. So we all know the science has been clear for decades, and we all know there's a great deal of denial at various levels. And we have had a lot of warm words from politicians, expensive talking shops, including COP, thousands of legal cases, 50 years of environmental campaigning, and none of it has worked in reducing or even leveling off the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And in fact, it's just going up, as we know. This is not, no one is able to argue about that. The science is just so clear. So governments did have a chance to take meaningful action at COP26 in Glasgow, not very far from here. That was in November 21, so a couple of years ago, and they failed to do so. The pledges they made at COP would bring us to 2.4 degrees C. So this is where everyone's still talking about 1.5 degrees, staying within 1.5 degrees. But in fact, the pledges and targets taken in Glasgow would actually lead us to a median of 2.4 degrees and possibly up to 3 degrees. But what's even more terrifying is that the current policies which are being implemented are set to take us to a median of 2.9 degrees C. So this is really worrying, and we know from the government in the UK, as well as many other governments in the world, that they are thinking of the short term and not the long term. And they're looking at serving themselves and their own power structure, because if they really understood, if they might understand, I believe a lot of them do understand what's going on, but for some reason or another, they choose to be blind. And we have to be very aware of the fact that they are choosing to be blind. It's not that they don't know, they really do know. So even at the low range of these figures, 2.4 degrees or 2.9, this is catastrophic for millions of people. And here in Scotland, we might be okay. It might not hit us quite as severely. But back to that command from Jesus to love our brothers and sisters, that means that we are watching them. We are watching them suffer, and at levels that we can't even imagine. And unfortunately, we can't really expect a great deal more from the next COP, which is in the UAE in November this year, because it is really quite ironic. The president of COP is going to be Sultan Al Jaber, and he is the head of the state oil company. And I read an article on the BBC, and it says, how can one man dedicate himself both to selling fossil fuels and tackling the climate crisis when his company aims to nearly double the output to 5 million barrels per day? And he actually brought this target forward. He increased the target. So it's hard to imagine. And the fact is that he cannot do both. He cannot serve his own company and the interests of the state and all his shareholders, and at the same time try to reduce the impacts of the climate emergency. And in fact, somebody said it's the equivalent of appointing the CEO of a cigarette company to oversee a conference on cancer cures. So unfortunately, the drive for business as usual is so embedded in the system of banking and politics and big business that it's hard to see how people who are in positions of authority are actually going to change their ways. And sometimes I think the only thing we can do is pray, But then I also believe that what we are bound to do is to speak truth to power and to protest and take action. So even at 2 degrees, just to set things out even more strongly about the consequences of the climate emergency on humans, I'll give you 3 statistics. 6 billion people will be exposed to severe heat waves with impacts on health and well-being. Up to 5 billion people, particularly in Africa and South Asia, are likely to face shortages of food and clean water. 340 million or more people living in coastal areas, as well as major cities worldwide, will be flooded out. So this will cause mass displacement of millions of people, leading to conflict over resources and potential societal collapse. So it's not just humans who are going to be who are already suffering. Today, biodiversity is declining at an unprecedented rate, and these are some of the examples of the reduction in biodiversity. And the pressures are just driving this in a more intensive way. And today, the mammals, this is how mammals are represented around the world. We've got 60% livestock. We humans take up 36%, and then just 4% for the wild, like these rhinos and elephants you can see here. And 1 million species are at risk of extinction. Crucially, 41% of insects are threatened with extinction. And obviously, I'm sure you know they're vital for pollination. But there is some good news. We do have a small window of time to bring some real action before it's too late. And what we in Christian Climate Action believe is that we believe that there is you can take personal action and lifestyle changes, and you can do things that are under your personal control. But the problem is that most CO2 that's emitted is on our behalf, entirely outside of our control, from sources like electricity generation, airports, shipping, agriculture, and heavy industry. And then, of course, deforestation, exploitative fishing, peat bog and mangrove destruction, and the vast deserts of monoculture farming, they're outside of our control. So it's critical that we make governments and international organizations and corporations change. That's one of the things we want to do. So the question is, what are we called to do? And everyone's called to do something different. And, you know, one of the questions that is sometimes asked is, what would Jesus do? And the gospel tells us that Jesus radically empowered the poor and disenfranchised in Galilee. Then he set his face to the central authorities in Jerusalem and started a walking campaign of non-violent civil disobedience. He disobeyed the Jewish laws. He disobeyed the empire laws, and so he engaged in this non-violent direct action. And went right into a table and turned over tables. He was not popular. And for this resistance, he was arrested, tried, and then executed. So the question, what would Jesus want us to do today? You know, that's something that's very personal, that requires discernment, meditation on our personal behalfs. And but in the face of this potential vast suffering, I think that Jesus does call us to do what we feel we are called to do within the climate action movement. And he would also urge us, I'm sure you'd all agree, to be people of action in as well as contemplation in our resistance to injustice and our seeking a world where all can flourish. And so that's what we in Christian Climate Action do. We're a community of Christians supporting each other to take meaningful action in the face of imminent and catastrophic climate breakdown. And so following the example of Jesus and inspired by the many social justice movements of the 20th century and beyond, we carry out acts of public witness non-violent direct action and civil disobedience to urge those in power to make the changes needed. So I would say that the vast majority of people in CCA do not take part in what we call arrestable actions. So the vast majority of people don't set themselves up to be arrested. And you have to be pretty determined to get arrested. But it's important that if you are part of CCA, that you do recognise that this is a tactic which some people use, and including myself. One action that I was involved in where I did get arrested was at St. Paul's Cathedral. So we were actively trying to get the Church of England to divest from fossil fuels. They have got quite a lot of clout in the financial world, and so we took part in this action. And what we did was, at the end of communion, we went up to the front, and I think I was just trying to remember what we were singing. I think it was, "Oh Lord, hear my prayer." So we went up to the front, and I have to say the most difficult part of it was not getting arrested or anything like that. It was just sitting, waiting to do this. And I was the first to go up, and it was quite daunting. And I remember sort of feeling very tense. But then once we got up to the front and had the banners, we were very well received. We were one of us, Karen, went up to the pulpit and said why we were there. We got a round of applause. The clergy were very engaging with us and very, very good. But then they'd already called the police as soon as we got up. But when we just said we weren't going to move from the front, they decided to get the police to arrest us. And so about 12 or 13 of us were arrested. And as I say, it felt really good to be at the time, in the sense that I felt as if I was doing the right thing at the right time. And in fact, we weren't charged at the end of the day. So I still don't have a conviction. But two or three things happened as a result of that. We got a meeting with Bishop Sarah Mullally, who's the Bishop of London. And so I was at that meeting, and she was very much, I think we were leaning against an open door. And then earlier this year in January, we had a meeting with the CEO of the pension board in the Church of England, and also the CEO of the Church Commissioners. And so we had a very constructive meeting with them. And then in June, they divested from all their pensions and the Church Commissioners from fossil fuels. So that is a good result. It was certainly not this action alone. Operation Noah and many other people contributed. But we do know that we wouldn't have had the meetings if we had just politely asked in a letter, can we please meet up? So direct action can have a direct effect. But back in Scotland, we do a lot of vigiling and pilgrimages. And so we've been at the Episcopal General Synod and the Church of Scotland Assembly. And then on the last Tuesday of every month, we are at the Scottish Parliament doing a vigil. And I've got to say that it's a very positive experience doing vigils. I did one at Waverley Station, and then you get a lot of people just coming up and asking what we're doing. And it's great to just, have a positive message, or rather, well, it's a positive presence in the face of the climate emergency, but showing that you're Christian and that you care. And we got a lot of American tourists who come up to us and say, gee, the Christians in our country don't have anything to do with this. And so they're always very impressed with what we're doing. And then we engage with the public as well. Now you'll notice that, Rob, that's your mugshot up there. This is from last week in Edinburgh. We were at a global event, which was started in New York, but through a lot of cities in the world, there were marches going on, and that's where we had a representation as Christian Climate Action. And then in the right-hand side was the pilgrimage, which Stephen mentioned, and this is in front of the cathedral in Glasgow, where our theme was Let Justice and Peace Flow. And so we started in Glasgow Green and then went to the gates of Cop, and we stopped off at the cathedral. And it was wonderful I read something out about to people who were it wasn't just Christians, it was lots of people from different backgrounds. We had Sikh people from the Sikh community in Glasgow. And so reading out some of the aspects of Laudato Si was a great privilege, because, you know, there's such a positive message in Laudato Si, and that's what the message was from at that pilgrimage spot. So it was really positive to be able to do that. But we're not all called to do marches. There are lots of different things that can be done. We can there's a lot of sharing which can be done on social media outreach. I do quite a lot of police station support as well when people have been arrested, to turn up to police stations. Die-ins are also very effective. The top left-hand picture was at Glasgow Central during COP, where we arranged a die-in, and the police were very supportive. They don't mind die-ins. They're quite happy to have that, and we may have one next Tuesday. So this is where we're going to be focusing next Tuesday at Scottish Parliament on the Christian Aid campaign of loss and damage and make polluters pay. And we're hoping to have some MSPs come and see us and some press. So we're going to hopefully have quite large numbers on next Tuesday. So that's from 12 till 2. And all you need to do is turn up. We have got placards and banners. So you just have to turn up at Scottish Parliament. That's the main thing there. I'm sure that most of people have seen the letter. So the Lorna is I think I saw someone who was from Falkirk. Is that St. Francis Xavier? So there was a screening there of the letter, and then as a result of that, I thought, oh, I wonder if Lorna would be able to share her experiences, and so she said yes, and so that's happening on Wednesday the 27th. So that's next Wednesday. And then we also have an evening with John Deere. So this is his book, which I'm reading at the moment, The Sacrament of Civil Disobedience. And so that's happening, and I can put the links in the chat. And so that's an evening on the 18th of October. And in addition to that, Sue, who's a good friend, who she has written this book. So she wrote the foreword for the Sacrament of Civil Disobedience, and she knows John, and she's written her own book, which is Bodies on the Line. So Sue it's hard not to get emotional about it, because she's been arrested a lot of times, and she's very philosophical about it. She's an Anglican priest, and she Martin Newell, who's a Passionist priest, he's been arrested with Sue quite a lot, or a few times, and so Sue is just gets on with. She just, I've seen her speak in court at a couple of her trials, and she just says, we've just got to sound the alarm. It's her duty to do that. So anyway, so Sue's going to be saying something on that evening as well. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. So I'd be happy to have any questions or challenges if you want. So please do ask me any questions.
Thank you very much, Val. We have a few questions here. The first question that came up was, what can we do to influence COP28 decisions?
Ooh, yeah. So I think that writing to MPs is something. I think that a lot of MPs and MSPs think that people don't care. They genuinely think that people care about the cost of living crisis, about how their lives are. So if it's possible to write to your MP, then that would be great, and to say, well, what is the UK delegation going to be saying at COP, and what are they going to be demanding and promising at COP28? With the current government, I think it's they're not exactly going to be pushing the envelope, I would imagine. But I think that even just showing MPs and MSPs that we do actually care about what's happening to the planet, and demanding more is a good thing.
If people wanted to write to their MPs but we were unsure of how to word it or what was the best things to say, is there somewhere that they can go to for inspiration or exemplars or whatever for writing to their MPs?
Yes, so particularly on the loss and damage campaign, I can share the Christian Aid have got a template for MPs, so Westminster MPs. I've written a template letter for MSPs on loss and damage in particular. So this is where one of the big results from COP27, which Christian Aid were really happy about, was the pledges for loss and damage. So there was an agreement made. They shouldn't be able to get off the hook. Government shouldn't be able to get off the hook. So in particular for loss and damage, there are two templates that I can definitely share. As far as the more general pledges, I will have a look to see if there are any template letters for that. But I think that as Christians, the loss and damage and what's happening to our neighbours in the global south is really, really important. And the more MPs and MSPs hear about it, the better. Okay.
So I hope they'll get a deluge soon. There's a couple of people asked about how do we get Rishi Sunak to change his mind, and how do we respond to what Rishi Sunak announced yesterday?
Yeah, I think it's very hard at this stage to. I think that the battle lines are being drawn on the climate emergency in the political arena, and I think that if it's just contacting MPs is one of the best ways to do it. And obviously we can think about protests, and that's another thing. So, for example, there are there've been protests at the at government, and I've been involved in some of them. I think that in Scotland, it's slightly different. When you're living in England, and I was living in England up until last year. I was in London a lot, doing protesting, marching, standing in front of Downing Street. Here it feels a wee bit more removed, and so I'm a bit frustrated about that. But if you wanted to know about any marches or events that are happening within Christian Climate Action, they're all on the website. And so I would definitely say that that's a good point of call. And there'll be some people who feel that Just Stop Oil, or maybe they go too far. I don't, and I have been involved with Just Stop Oil. But I think that public disruption is something that in Scotland there's less of an appetite for compared to England. So and This Is Rigged is a bunch of young people, mainly in Glasgow. We've met quite a few of them, and did police station support for them because they did quite a lot of actions in Grangemouth. And I feel that, again, getting into the public arena is important. It's just how far you want to go to do that. But if anyone is interested in supporting actions like This Is Rigged or Extinction Rebellion, then please get in touch, and I can do some signposting there.
Rab put on the chat that he watched an interview with someone from Extinction Rebellion, and the interviewer said, "But there are people who share your aims but are not causing disruption. Why can you not be like them?" And the guy replied, "But you're not interviewing them, you're interviewing me because of our actions."
Yeah,
so
that's it. And it's, I've been involved in quite a few actions where, it's been a bit disruptive, and I can understand, I'm a people pleaser. I hate upsetting people, but, unfortunately, to get in the press, that's what it takes. It's the same with the Barclays smashing of the glass in Glasgow. When was it? Earlier this year, and it got into the press. It got into radio too. But if we had just stood there, we wouldn't have got onto the media.
Before we leave COP28 completely, somebody's saying, is boycotting COP28 a valid or realistic option? Obviously, by that I mean NGOs, etc. could there be an alternative COP28? It feels like there is cynicism at the heart of this COP. And as you said,
Yeah.
who's leading it?
That's right. I think there's some people who feel that, yeah, boycotting would be a gesture. But unfortunately, it's well, my personal opinion is that we still have to be in the room. We have to be in the room, but not to expect a great deal from it. But I mean, there are 200 countries there. And apparently the oil and gas lobby had as many people as one country at COP26. But I think we have to still be in the room. But yeah, it's a tricky one. But obviously UK will be represented.
Okay. A few people are picking up on the whole "is it right to break the law" theme. Anne said, "I've been watching Chris Packham's new documentary on Channel 4, Is It Time to Break the Law?", in which he expresses his extreme frustration at the lack of action by decisions." Yeah, so
yeah. Well, I think
that
if you're doing it with the right heart and having discerned and thought about it, you don't wake up one morning and think, oh, I think I'll just go and break the law. There is a penalty to be paid. You have to. My husband's been he's been convicted twice. Pete's been convicted twice, and that. But for someone of our age, and it's not a big deal. But for young people, it's a huge sacrifice, and I would find it. It's really important that young people understand the consequences before they actually do anything. And in CCA, we would never have anyone, any underage people as part of an action unless their parents specifically wanted them to be there or allowed them to be there. But I do believe that breaking the law is just like in the civil rights movement, just like suffragettes, just like in India with Gandhi. There are moments when breaking the law is justified. So my personal view is that, yes, if you're doing it for the right reasons and you're doing it in a non-violent way, and that's where, as Christians, we've got this power. I mean, I was at a Shell AGM last year, or the Shell AGM last year, and so there were about 70 of us who went in to disrupt the AGM, and it was quite an alarming experience in some ways because we got shouted at a lot. But at one point, we decided to sing Amazing Grace. And there were 3 of us all wearing CCA T-shirts. And we'd stood on our chairs and we glued our hands to each other. So I was in the middle and I had my hands like that. And it was really quite funny. So a security guard came up and then Kate, one of my friends, said, "So what's your name?" and asked the name, and then said, "Well, shall we pray? I think we should pray for you." So then the 3 of us were praying for him. Then a police officer came up and said, asked us to stop doing what we were doing. And we did the same. So we just said, we're obviously courteous to people, and then we just prayed for them. And so it's like a kind of superpower we've got as Christians, because we can just sort of sit there and say, I think we're just going to pray now. I think we're just going to sing now. And it kind of really, it's what's the word? It takes a lot of the bad energy in the room and and we can just say we're just going to pray. So and then if we didn't get arrested actually, and we were quite surprised. But anyway, we did stop the AGM from going on for a while.
Somebody has suggested that people in business suits get the TV coverage. So it said the major failure of the big one was not getting enough TV coverage. It seems that people in business suits protesting do get TV coverage. Would you agree with that statement?
Is that people like Extinction Rebellion people in business suits?
I don't know.
Because we did an action at Barclays in Glasgow this year. And we had 2 guys dressed up in business suits with a big plastic globe, and we had oil over it, and they were doing a sort of kind of act saying, "Oh, we're the executives, and we're just destroying the planet with all this oil." But we got some press. I think that actually at the big one, I'm not just saying this because we're CCA, but we got more coverage than anybody else because we had Archbishop Sentamu we marched to Shell headquarters, and Archbishop Sentamu was outside, and they called the police. He was there to deliver a letter to Shell, and their response was, we're calling the police. And so that got into the Times, I think, actually. So yeah, so yeah, I think it does help to have to do these things with. I come from a business background, actually, so I think big business needs to be taken on.
Right. John, it was John Woodhouse who put the question on, and he said he's talking about a protest on the Millennium Bridge by business people. So they seemed to get the coverage.
Ah, right.
There are a couple of people who have mentioned Laudato Si. So how far is Laudato Si and the new edition by Pope Francis part of Catholic preaching and spirituality? So what place does it have to play? How far can you take it? How widespread is it used?
So my personal view is that Laudato Si should embolden us. I think it should. I think we, as Catholics, we're kind of, the boss has said this is wrong, so we're going to act on it. And again, I wouldn't encourage anyone or urge someone to do something arrestable if they don't feel that that's right, but certainly to do as much as possible, and come along to the Scottish Parliament vigil, or take part in any actions that you feel you're called to do. But I think Laudato Si is such an encouragement, a huge encouragement for us to actually do something and feel, the words are there, they're an inspiration, and so I feel that that's something that drives me on.
Somebody else has mentioned climate migrants, and the fact that this is going to be a real issue the further on this goes, and about challenging politicians and policies and voting for those who are aware of the reality of the inevitable inward migration. Have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, this is where I think the Christian Aid Loss and Damage campaign is so important, because people don't want to leave their homes. So basically, we have to. The Loss and Damage campaign is on two fronts. It's paying people for the climate emergency that is causing their crops to fail, that causing the uninhabitable areas of land, but also helping them in areas where they could mitigate climate, the effects of climate change. We have to help them to do that. We have to help them to build flood defences, or help them with sustainable crops, or help them with being able to have a livable area where they can actually thrive. But that does take money and resources, and we should be paying and stumping up for this. So I think that we should obviously welcome migrants as much as possible, but remembering that maybe they don't want to leave their place, but they're being forced to.
Another question, and this is quite a big one, is surely we have to get politicians to get away from the idea that we must always have growth. We need to face that a change in economic structures is vital. Would you feel we should be directing more attention to this?
Yes, as as a business person, and we had a company, I always felt that we needed to grow a bit, not a huge amount, but I felt as if there was always that. It was almost like it would be bad business not to. But I was listening to the Big Green Money show, which was Deborah Meaden's show on 5 Live, and her approach was to say that growth is not always good, and there's sometimes a natural level at which businesses just shouldn't go, because they're forcing their business model to beyond an area of efficiency. And so I thought this comment was quite interesting, because there is this absolute drive for growth, and Labour are no better than Tory on this. But the reality is that not all businesses want to grow. And in fact, in the British economy, there's a lot of people who are coming away from the big business world and starting up micro businesses. And they don't see those businesses growing to something, you know, something big. They just want to have a sustainable living income, and not grow. So it would be interesting to know what your average punter said about growth. I would imagine that maybe they just don't feel as strongly as politicians, but that's just my view. That, you know, the GDP of a country isn't helping us. You know, the fact that it's growing doesn't help people with a cost of living crisis. So there's a really good economist called Mariana Mazzucato. She's an Italian-American professor at UCL. And she talks about the value of everything. So it's value as opposed to growth. And what does value actually mean in this world? And the fact that GDP is just not relevant anymore in this world. But I would be interested to know what people thought about the fact that, is it a big motivator for the electorate, which is what it seems that politicians think. They think that all we want is growth. And in fact, what people want is a decent income and a decent standard of living.
Mm-hmm. So Rab has just mentioned a wellbeing economy. You know, a lot of us are familiar, have heard the term and know what that means. But as you say, your average person is not familiar with these terms and doesn't really, you know, are we failing in a way in that we are not highlighting the benefits to health and well-being, having a well-being economy rather than a growth economy? Should there be more done to kind of promote that and have people aware that growth is not the answer, especially with the climate crisis, that they go hand in hand? You know, that we could have our health and well-being could benefit as well as the planet.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that the reality is, in the business world, you've got maybe about, I think 50% of employees are in the SME sector, so small to medium enterprise. So that's companies of less than 200 employees. And I think that in the SME world, this drive for growth is not there. It's, you know, there are a lot of SMEs who are quite happy to stay at, you know, 20 employees, 40 employees, 50 employees, and similar turnovers. But the big business world is driving this. They you know, that's what the narrative is coming from the big business world, and unfortunately they call the shots a lot of the time. But well-being is what people are interested, and possibly, you know, the younger generation, I think, are much more in tune with this. You know, they don't want to just get a job to have the highest salary and then a rubbish work-life balance. So I think that young people are much more attuned to this, and I think it's maybe the politicians are just missing a trick here.
And maybe so are we.
Yeah.
Well, like that's maybe what we're needing to shout about and talk about more too. John has just said people have short memories when it comes to the ballot box. We need to remind them of people about child poverty, food banks, inequality, debt, etc. So somebody else is talking about the wellbeing economy. Found it on YouTube and it's amazing to listen to.
And so, there's also donut economics with Kate Raworth, is it? Yeah. So donut, that's a really interesting concept as well. And so I think that there's a lot out there in the academic world, but here we are in the real world, and real people want a good standard of living, and that's what young people want. You know, it's not growth for the sake of growth. You know, it's a bit bonkers, actually.
It's about who controls the narrative, isn't it? And who speaks the loudest and has the most impact and power. And, you know, that takes us on to back to, again, about the vested interests in big business and the vested interests in the politicians, and how that is what we have to try and counter.
Yeah.
So it seems there are so many things to counter when it comes to climate action, you know, when it comes about biodiversity and CO2 emissions, and where do we start? It just becomes overwhelming, doesn't it? So how do we stop ourselves getting overwhelmed by all this?
Well, I suppose you know, we've got I suppose, compared to not obviously in any faith, meditation and prayer is really important. It's you know, I think meditating on this and having, maybe going on a retreat and making sure that we're grounded, because sometimes I can get quite angry about it, but anger is anger is a good motivator, as long as you don't get you don't lose your temper with people. You know, you have to forgive people for what they're doing, and that's really important as well, I think. But I think that grounding ourselves in prayer is really important, and knowing that I read this thing about, we can't save the earth, but we can serve the earth. And we can serve the earth by some of the things that we do, but also by deciding what actions we want to take part in. And we can't do everything. Yeah, we've got to be careful that our mental and emotional welfare is looked after.
Now, you have mentioned quite a few things that we could actively take part in the course of the talk tonight. You know, and you were talked about meaningful action.
Yeah.
Public witness, civil disobedience, direct action. Can you remind us again, you know, so things that we can get involved in? You know, I know that you have mentioned them before, but I think it can easily be lost to us as to what exactly we could do. So we can write to MPs, we can go to these protests. What else can we do?
So on the CCA website and the Christian Climate Action UK website, there are lots of actions that are featured there. A lot of them, some of them in London, but in fact there's more regional stuff going on. As far as CCA Scotland is concerned, well, I think that the Scottish Parliament one is something we're doing every month. And then we'll be doing different actions. And so, for example, one thing that we're thinking about doing is in November, sorry, October, November, we're going to be looking at doing some action because of COP28. And so that will probably be something in Glasgow, because obviously COP26 was in Glasgow. So those are the kind of things that we can take part in physically. And I think that also, you know, I can put in the chat the link to Lorna's session and then John Deere's session, to try and understand a bit more about what other people are feeling and thinking, and then deciding what is right for us, as you know, because we're all going to be very different. There are quite a lot of young people who are being arrested, and you can maybe sometimes help out with funding their court cases. It's true, there are so many things that you can do, but I think the CCA website is a really good website, and then we always post things on the CCA Scotland Facebook page, and then you can sign up to CCA if you'd like to, and so you just need to send an email to me so that I can put that in the chat as well. So in fact, I better do that now before we end. So I'll just put my email in the chat.
While you're doing that, John Woodhouse has made a suggestion: start with yourself, then your parish, then the diocese, then the local community, the politician, and the list is endless. So sign petitions, write letters, not just emails. So good suggestions there.
Very good, yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm sure that Stephen from Eco Congregation would say, get your parish to start getting on that journey, get it going. And then also screening of the letter, that's something I'm doing next week. People who haven't seen the letter, it's a really good way of introducing people to the emotional and an emotional connection to those people. So the young guy from Senegal, the indigenous guy from the Amazon, the young woman from India, and then the two scientists from Hawaii. They can see these things happening to them. It's not this facts and figures. It's really important to understand the cry of the poor and the young.
And bringing those personal stories to people is definitely, the way forward. Statistics just don't work. Somebody else, another suggestion is become a Laudato Si ambassador. All these things, help to get us going. So I'm having a wee look through to make sure I haven't missed any of these questions.
Apologies, I've just put, I was trying to put a link to the screening of the letter with Lorna and the meeting registry, and then the Zoom meeting with John Deere, but unfortunately the link doesn't seem to translate to the chat. Don't know why that is.
We can send them out with the recording.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Well, I'm running out of questions here. If anybody's got any more questions, if you would like to pop them on the chat, that would be great. I am delighted we have had so many practical suggestions for things that people can get involved in. You have really inspired me. I am thinking now that I need to go to the next protest. Anybody, any more questions? Somebody's just asked, are the Scottish Parliament protests at a regular time on Tuesdays?
Yes, so it's the last Tuesday of every month and it's between 12 and 2. Good. And so we're looking for hopefully getting quite a lot of people.
One thing that I noticed during the campaigning for the leader to take over from Nicola Sturgeon, wellbeing economy was mentioned more than once from the Scottish politicians. So it's not completely alien. It is, there are people aware of it, and I don't know, is it fair to say that this is maybe more acceptable to mention in Scotland than it is, or is more often mentioned in Scotland than it is in England?
That's my impression, actually. Yeah, it's mentioned more in Scotland compared to England. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's, again, I think the other big problem that we're facing is how to transition from oil, and particularly in Aberdeen and those areas up there, how and Extinction Rebellion have got an arm that is related to unions. So there's a lot of conversation now about not just words, but how can people who are earning quite a lot on an oil rig, for example, how can they be motivated to work on a wind farm with maybe less income? And so there's a lot of talk about how that might happen. But one thing which is dissimilar to the coal mines, for example, where there were entire communities decimated, with the oil and gas, there are less small communities associated with that. You've got people piling in from all over the country to go to work near Aberdeen and offshore. But the reality is that it works very well for those people. They earn a decent living. So it's difficult for those people to actually stop doing that and to want to actually go to an alternative economy.
Yeah. So somebody has put on, if you want to become a data animated, please do so before the end of the year. They're not doing courses in 2024. Don't know why that is. Another question from John: how do we get Cardinal Vincent to speak out about this? The Scottish Cardinals do so much. I think he maybe means bishops. We've got one bishop in particular who's very vocal when it comes to the climate, but just one, I would say. How do we get Cardinal Vincent to speak out about this?
Well, yeah, I suppose we could do a protest at one of the masses. Yeah, that's a possibility. If anyone wants to put that, I'm up for that for sure. Because sometimes I think this is where protest can actually work. I mean, for example, we interrupted the General Synod at York. This was in the Church of England, and we did get a conversation with the Archbishop Justin Welby, and then that was last year when we interrupted, and there were a lot of really angry people, and but a lot of people who were also quite happy for us to be interrupting the session. And then this year, we had a really good conversation with Justin Welby, and he actually said, and he said it straight to me, so I was there, and he said, and remember, Justin Welby worked in the oil industry for Elf Aquitaine, and he said, yes, I think that we will have to consider disincentives for oil companies and those associated with oil companies, such as carbon tax. So, that's quite a big move, because the previous conversation we had with him was very unhelpful. And sometimes I think just having, obviously done in a peaceful way, just being in somebody's face, but in a peaceful way, can sometimes jolt people a bit. So if anyone's up for that kind of action, I'd be happy to be in that.
Excellent. Another good question: what is the place of investments and shareholders in a new approach to the economy?
Yes. So is everyone familiar with Make My Money Matter? It was something started by Richard Curtis, and there's also the Canadian guy who was head of the Bank of England. Can't remember his name. So Make My Money Matter is if you go to that website, that really gives a lot more about asking pensions to divest from fossil fuels. The Church of England for 5 years, from 2018 to 2023, argued that being part of the discussion, so having a seat at the table as an investor, was worth it, was actually working, until it stopped working, until they realized it just wasn't going to work. And the capitalist model is, if you're a CEO of a company, your absolute prime directive is to maximize shareholder return. That's your job. There's no other job apart from that is more important. So if you as a shareholder say, but could you please not do that and do something less profitable but better for the climate, for the planet, they're simply not going to do it. In a way, it's not their fault. That's the way the system works. They just get sacked if they don't do that. And so I think it's actually quite naive to think that companies will do the right thing. They'll only do the thing that maximizes shareholder return. And so I believe that divestment is probably, following the money. If a CEO sees that, let's say, for example, in Shell, if people started to
We've lost Val temporarily. So I'll read out what Rab has said. Look out for the various consultation papers that the Scottish Government publish and often have direct or indirect impact on climate change. So there does seem to be a bit of more of an awareness there. Somebody else has had an observation. Do I get the impression that women are more open to these questions? And he's looking at the participants tonight. And Charles has suggested the first contact Westminster bishop. He's the bishop responsible for refugees and asylum seekers. So maybe somebody else can answer this question. Has the Scottish Catholic Church disinvested from fossil fuels? They said they were going to. Have they done so? Maybe Rab would know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think they've made the commitment. I think the hard thing is finding out, is there actually evidence that they have done it? But we could definitely ask, yeah.
Right, okay. The Westminster Diocese Justice and Peace Coordinator has been working hard with the diocese to work towards carbon neutrality. That's down in Westminster. And there's a big link in the chat there for that. So I don't know if we've lost Val completely, Rab.
I think she has. I'm just hoping she's trying to come back in.
Rab, do you know anything about the Coat of Hopes? Somebody's asked a question about the Coat of Hopes.
Yeah, it was part of the pilgrimage that it came from up south and went to COP in Glasgow, and then was recently, there was another pilgrimage. I don't know, John Woodhouse possibly might know more.
I've just admitted Val back in, Rab.
Excellent, you're awfully good. I'll need to you press the recording button next time.
Hi, Rab. Did you want me to say something about Coat of Hopes?
Yes.
If you could, John, that would be great.
It was at the big one. I actually saw it. It was actually on Parliament Square. So it's people were putting it on, and it was very impressive, actually. And I also have to say that we actually had Mass on Parliament Square, which was a moving moment indeed. And the celebrant started by showing everybody Laudato Si. And I've said in the chat there that we don't hear about Laudato Si at Mass hardly at all. And that's something we can really push. Ask our parish priests to actually preach about it, especially in the season of creation. There's so much to be done.
Can I ask, Rab, have you made, there you go, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Sorry, we lost you there, Val.
Yeah, I just disappeared. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't think I pressed anything, but yeah.
So somebody had just been asking about the Coat of Hopes.
Oh, the Coat of Hopes. Yeah.
I actually don't know what it is.
Yeah, so the Coat of Hopes started in the South Coast. Barbara Keel, who's the artist who made it, and it's made from blanket. And it's hard to express what the Coat of Hopes is really. I've been on 2 or 3 different stints of the Coat of Hopes journey. So it started on the South Coast and then walked via London up to COP26. And the Coat of Hopes is made from blanket. And the idea is that it's a warmth. When you try it on, there's warmth in it. And there are patches, over 600 patches sent in by the people of the communities through which the Coat of Hopes has passed. And recently I was very privileged to be involved in the walk from Glasgow to Edinburgh via Cumbernauld and Falkirk and Grangemouth and South Queensferry. And then we took it from Edinburgh. It was at St Mary's Episcopal Cathedral in Edinburgh, where it was part of the festival. And then we walked it from Edinburgh to Galashiels, except that at Middleton, a very tiny hamlet, one of us got COVID. So we had to abandon it, which was a real shame. And so it's a wonderful thing. It's a pilgrimage because we're staying in churches and church halls. And if anyone knows any churches down the East Coast, so from Galashiels to York, then it would be great to know about anyone who might host, because I'm sad to say that the vast majority of churches are not Catholic churches that people that are hosting the Coat of Hopes and the pilgrims on the Coat of Hopes journey. But what happens with the Coat of Hopes is that somebody tries it on and we sing a song. And it sounds a bit naff, you you sing a song, but it's an amazing feeling, because what it has a presence. It's an object, but at the same time, it's not a holy relic. It's just but you do feel there's something about this coat, and it carries the hopes, the fears, the remembrances of the people who engage in it. And I'll just tell you a very quick story. We're going through it near Grangemouth, and then there was a community of travellers. And as you probably know, travellers are seen as not the, I don't know, they're not treated very generously, let's say. And there were these kids, and they're coming up and they were wearing the coat and they were singing, they were really enthusiastic. And then one of them said, "Do you believe in Jesus? Do you believe in God?" And we said, yeah, we believe in Jesus, we believe in God. I said, "Oh yeah, that's great." And so they were doing their own kind of version of trying to share their faith with us. So it was a very moving moment. And the one thing is that we couldn't send them a patch kit because they don't have an address. And but luckily the local guy, Willie Shaw, he's going to make sure that they get a kit so that they can sew a patch for the coat.
Very good. So we're about coming up to time for our last question. So I am looking to see, there's lots here about where to look and where you can find information on where your diocese has, if they've divested or not divested. I think you missed some of that conversation. And there's lots of people saying, "Thank you very much, Val. This has been very inspiring and very informative." So I think we will leave it there, because you have covered a lot of ground. So thank you again. And can I
Thank
just
you
say
for inviting
something
me.
before you go? I'm St Bernadette's in Motherwell.
Really? Oh my goodness.
So maybe if we get a chance at some point, we can.
I'd love to catch. Yeah, I haven't been there for a while. I was married in St Bernadette's.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So that's something for another time. So thank you very, very much. So
It's a
who
pleasure.
do you
Thank you
ask
for inviting me.
now?
Thank you very much, Gemma. Thank you, Val. That was interesting. I think sometimes in Scottish Catholic circles, all roads do lead to Motherwell, not to Rome. And we certainly found that out this evening. I must admit, it wasn't a huge surprise to find that was the case.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to Val. It was such an inspiring evening. And what really struck me was that non-violent, radical action is rooted in our faith. And there's a real challenge for us all to answer that call to respond to the climate emergency. And those fantastic stories and examples of the work that Val's been doing with Christian Climate Action Scotland and with a whole range of partners across the churches, including our own, and we need to all work together far more closely to really take action to tackle the climate crisis. So thank you very much, Val. It was an inspiring evening, and you managed to make it back in. So technical difficulties were overcome quite comfortably there, which is a good lesson for us all to be persistent and resilient at this time. Well, we'd like to finish by saying a prayer for you. Loving God, we thank you for the insight, wisdom, and commitment of Val. We thank you for what she has shared with us this evening. We ask that you anoint her anew, such that her discipleship may continue to be empowered by your Spirit. Amen.
Sorry, I'll start that again. Prayer for Christian climate action. Creator Spirit, we thank you for the witness of CCA. We thank you for their meaningful action in the face of imminent and catastrophic anthropogenic climate breakdown. May they continue to be inspired by Jesus Christ and guided by the Holy Spirit. Creator God, we thank you for Eco Congregation Scotland. We pray that your Spirit will empower them in their prayer, worship and conversation as they seek to discover what it means to care for God's creation and act to live justly in a transformed world. So we now close the formal part of our evening by praying the 2023 season of creation prayer.
Creator of all, from your communion of love, life sprung forth like a mighty river, and the whole cosmos came into being. On this earth of overflowing love, the Word was made flesh and went forth with the life-giving waters, proclaiming peace and justice for all creation.
You called human beings to till and keep your garden. You placed us into right relationship with each creature, but we failed to listen to the cries of the earth and the cries of the most vulnerable. We broke with the flowing communion of love and sinned against you by not safeguarding the conditions for life.
We lament the loss of our fellow species and their habitats. We grieve the loss of human cultures, along with the lives and livelihoods that have been displaced or perished. And we ache at the sight of an economy of death, war, and violence that we have inflicted on ourselves and on the earth.
Open our ears to your creative, reconciling and sustaining word that calls to us through the book of Scripture and the book of creation. Bless us once again with your life-giving waters, so that the Creator Spirit may let justice and peace flow into our hearts and overflow into all creation.
Open our hearts to receive the living waters of God's justice and peace, and to share it with our suffering brothers and sisters, all creatures around us, and all creation. Bless us to walk together with all people of good will, so that the many streams of the living waters of God's justice and peace may become a mighty river all over the earth.
In the name of the one who came to proclaim good news to all creation, Jesus Christ. Amen. So thanks to Val and to Eco Congregation Scotland, to Stephen and to all who have joined us tonight. We hope you'll be with us for our final session next week, when we welcome as our companion Neil Douglas Klotz, who will share with us on birthing cosmos and self-revelations of the Aramaic Jesus. To those who are leaving the meeting at this point, good night, God bless, and we invite you to log off. For those who wish to stay on and join a breakout room, please stay connected, and in a few minutes we'll generate the breakout rooms. Thank you.